Without further ado, I'd like to pass this to our presenters and ask them to introduce themselves and kick off this webcast. John, the stage is yours.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much for the warm introduction, Anna, and couldn't agree with you more. We've got an exciting few months ahead with all the World Forums. Excited to get out there and see people in person. Always a highlight of my year for certain. Delighted to be joined here today with a couple of old friends, colleagues in the ecosystem. I was riffing with G this morning. We were joking about how it was a couple years ago we were on a webinar together with our digital practice talking about innovation, and here we are now talking about contact center, and maybe that doesn't necessarily all equate, but I think, as I think through what we're talking about today, it should equate, and I'm excited to be on here today. 3CLogic, G, there's a ton of innovation going on in this space, and I really want you to rethink and reimagine your contact centers and how you're approaching your experiences with your customers. And hopefully we can impart some wisdom upon you today on how our customers are out there innovating in this space. My name is John Reynolds. I'm pleasured to lead alliances, corporate development, and marketing here at Third Era, a Cognizant company. With that, let me turn it over to my two guest speakers with me today. G, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, John, thanks for hosting, and appreciate you inviting me on today, and thanks to our audience for taking the time. So my name is Guillaume. I run our strategic practice at 3CLogic, of which, of course, ServiceNow is a strategic partner of ours. So looking forward to today's conversation on contact center, and to your point, how that all mixes together with innovation.
Awesome, awesome. I dare say the best dressed person on this webinar as well, for certain. The sharp jacket. David Peterson.
Thanks, John. Yep, David Peterson. I'm a principal consultant here at Third Era, supporting the customer and industry workflow. So really excited to be a part of this team, delivering some really great information on contact center and how we can really help you.
Fantastic. All right, y'all. Just a quick look at the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about some points of view, a little bit of status on the industry. Hopefully impart some key considerations that as you are contemplating your current contact centers, how you are approaching those experiences with your customers. Want to get into some of the innovation that 3C is bringing to the ecosystem. I think, listen, I'm on here with them for a reason. I think they're the most innovative company out there that is progressing and building themselves complementary to ServiceNow. Really excited to talk to you more about that. We'll get into some Q&A. Before we jump in, G, David, what do you want people to get out of today's session? Is there something that's, takeaways? Let's just get right to the aha moment there at the end. What are you thinking about?
Yeah,
Dave, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think, really, I know, G, you and I had an opportunity to kind of talk through this previously before as well, but I really want, our customers to really, I'd say, be intentional, right, about what kind of experience that you need your customers to have as they interact with your brand. We really want to elevate this as an overall brand experience. There's obviously a lot of tools and capabilities for us to do that, but we want you to really think about that overall experience, understand your customers, and then, obviously talk with us after this to figure out how we can really double down on those solutions to help you get that.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think part of what we want to make sure we're addressing is that there's a lot of excitement around AI, obviously, and everyone's asking the obvious question, which is how can this all fit within their contact center strategy? And then, of course, how does this all parlay to, foundationally with ServiceNow, right? So hopefully people will realize that there's probably no silver bullet. There's going to be some work involved, but at the same time, there's a lot of innovative capabilities that have rolled out that can also make things a little bit more exciting, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more cost, efficient, as well as agent optimization available out there. But it's going to take really the combination of a couple of different solutions like that of ServiceNow, like 3CLogic, and then the methodology that you apply in bringing these systems together is also going to be just as important as the features and technologies you choose to use, right? So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but this whole trash in, trash out, aspect that, if you're not careful, you could deploy AI, for example, and still be very disappointed with the results if you haven't done the homework. So hopefully that'll be among some of the takeaways.
Awesome, awesome. Looking forward to it. Let's get into it. Want to open up, talk a little bit. I think it's imperative that we address the industry question on here, and what do contact centers mean for industry. I think at their core, as I was working on this, you've got, I think, the customer engagement models, and I know, this is a space that you guys are experts in, right? I mean, you've got to be all the different means by which people are engaging the contact centers, and I think that's something that's evolving before our eyes, and maybe in some cases not evolving as rapidly as we might think as well. There's some aha moments kind of inside the data there, but then really where you begin to really differentiate what separates contact centers industry to industry is, when you get into the aspects as well of things like case management, right? And which, really is the unstructured aspects of how those contact center workers are engaging, right? There's a lot more decision factors at work when we're thinking about case management. And I see a lot of nuances industry to industry when we think about case management and how we process those. And then you get to those very, very structured things, the business process management side of the house, like a password reset's a really, really easy kind of answer to that. I think as I was looking at some of the themes within some of the these industries that I called out here, some interesting statistics to pull off the page. In the automotive industry, manufacturing, for example, those manufacturers that put case management, that put contact center, that put customer service kind of at the forefront of that are out there proactively working on post-sales, outwardly reaching out to their customers, engaging with them. They see a 20% improvement in customer retention just on that simple fact. Proactive maintenance reminders, 15% increase in customer sat, 10% increase in likelihood of repeat business. Pivoting over to the telco industry, right? 71% of consumers are willing to switch telecom providers just simply based on their customer service experience. It's quite profound. You get into the banking industry, you get into a lot more specialization around the case management, the demand, the need for customized applications. So, while we do see certain themes at an industry level, when you kind of distill them back up at their core, it does still come back to being excellent around how you process and manage your customer engagement on the omni-channel, your case management, driving efficiency, driving automation, driving a great experience with your customers, being proactive, and then of course doing the easy stuff really well. And I think that's the business process management side, opportunity for a lot of innovate, a lot of automation in that space. Keen to get your guys' opinions. What do you see when you think about contact center for industry, the commonalities, the differences as you strafe across the different industries?
Well, there's probably a few things. I think one, everyone has always, contact center sort of has a negative reputation, if you will. At a C-suite level, it's a cost center, right? From a consumer point of view, you're doing everything you can to avoid calling. Why? Because historically, that's always been a very bad experience. And then, of course, for organizations, it's the most expensive form of service. So it's not a surprise that digital transformation has been a focus. The idea is like, hey, let's automate things like password reset, things that shouldn't require you to hold to get to an agent, and for that matter, for an agent to be involved when they could be doing something more useful. But at the same time, you've raised the most important factor. People judging everything on the basis of experience. The switching costs are not what they were 10 years ago, right? So it's very easy for me to change providers. So I think it still needs to be a core part of the strategy. But what we've seen historically is a lot of organizations are really caught between a hard rock and a hard place. On one end, they don't want to keep throwing people at the problem, which is historically what they do. I have more volume, I'm going to add more agents. And that is not a sustainable strategy. And so there's no surprise that people are going and looking towards AI to try and help offset and provide scale there. But at the same time, if you're not careful, we've seen the pendulum swing a little bit too far, where everyone thinks, I'm just going to put everything through the AI, and I'm going to completely remove the human component. And that, historically, from what we've seen, has been a mistake. And so I think what all organizations are struggling with is what's the proper balance between the two.
Yeah, Absolutely, couldn't agree. And I think just some other themes that we've also been seeing, and as this slide kind of resonates with some of the attendees that we have here today, it also is about the scale of your contact center, having information that's available. We're hearing more and more from customers where, particularly maybe they've outsourced some of their contact center, or they're going through more of a significant refresh of the agents that they actually have there. It's really important that they have really great information that's available to those contact center associates and agents that are taking in those customer calls and inquiries, to make sure that they have the right information to provide to their customers. Also, at the same time, really being intentional about how, I would say, level and how prevalent that information is available via multiple sources, because many times you don't get to choose how your customer interacts with you if you have multiple ways to get it done. And so just making sure that you can bring a lot of that efficiency in the back end to your contact centers and to your customers, I think is really critical for customers to consider.
Yeah, awesome thoughts. Awesome thoughts. All right, I'm gonna change slides. We'll get more around this as we go, because I think there's a lot of examples as we get into the aspects that really compose an excellent customer service experience, and being able to relate those back to some of the demands out of these industries. I'm gonna put a picture up here. David Peterson, I know this is near and dear to your heart because this is your backyard. Some people might recognize this airport specifically, but I think honestly, we've all been through airports. We've all been through, and for those of you, take Anna's advice. I'd love to see some reactions from you. How does this make you feel? How does the customer service experience at your local airport? Remember your last family vacation, and what was it about that really was impactful? How did that leave you feeling? David, offer up some thoughts on your Atlanta airport. I'd love to hear more about your thinking on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the largest by volume airports in the world. And, if you think about just the sheer number of passengers that have to go through that airport, you think about what that kind of means from a customer experience perspective. As you get there, what kind of information do you have available to you in order to get to where you're going? What other partners are around, or other aids and assistance to help you get there? Maybe it's the Delta app, the United app, agents that are available, the signage. Do you actually get to where you need to get to and get on your aircraft in a timely fashion? How easy is the process? And I think, many of those, correlations also really align and relate to the kinds of experiences that your customers have with you. And we're only talking about one airport, right? But if you compare it to other airports as well, maybe older airports or airports who had to really kind of scale, it's really worth considering the information that's available, how they get there. And it actually does have some correlation to, a lot of these experiences that we've been helping customers solve for recently.
Good. Yeah, good thoughts there. I think, when I think about the airport customer service experience, there's a few things that kind of come to mind, that it's not one experience. It's actually a number of very disjointed experiences. There's no continuity of information from one experience to the next. It's a lot like, my last conversation with, say, my local telecommunications provider, who also provides my cable, my satellite, my cell phone, right? I have a number of services with them. But when I get handed off from the billing desk to, the cell phone desk to talk about a plan, to, another issue that I may be having for a service dispatch, there's very little warm handoff. There's very little passing of information from one to the next. No different than when I go check in my bags, then I pivot over to security. I'm showing my driver's license again and again and again. Very different levels of experience depending on who I'm dealing with. So, that's kind of what's left upon me when I think about, customer service. And I think, as we think about our contact centers, we ought to think about them in the same light. How do we make that a very unified, crisp, and consistent experience? I'll throw another image up here. I want to go to the other side of the spectrum. I pulled this one out because I think this is something that a lot of people, can associate with, a very, very positive customer experience, a company that obsesses about customer experience. Now, G, what was your last awesome customer experience. And how did that leave you to feel?
I'll tell you, it wasn't traveling. My last travel experience, it took me 4 days to get home. And when the flight was canceled, even though it was in the airport, physically where you would hope to get the most amount of help from the airline that canceled, they said, no, you got to go to the chatbot. The chatbot's going to rebook your flight. And, disjointed experience, an attempt at digital transformation gone wrong, if you will. So my last travel experience was bad, but I can absolutely echo the Disney reference in this case. Not just as an adult, but you look at the children, right? I mean, they get you through the kids. But the experience end to end, the level of personalization. Obviously, there's a lot of systems and workflows in the background. They've just done a very good job of making sure that they're connected and synced, so that at each point of engagement, whether it's at check-in, whether it's at the restaurant, whether it's at the amusement park, it seems as if they already know who you are and what you might be interested in. It's exceptional, but it's rare. It's definitely the metric that most people try and aim for. I think very few have an understanding of just the level of complexity it takes to reach that point.
I think it's a really good example of, despite all of the technology that's available to us, and we're going to talk about a lot of that technology and that capabilities, you still have to have a culture of customer service within your company.
That's right.
And what I love about about this company in particular is that all these cast members, to me, they are customer service first, and then whatever their day job is second. But each and every one of them will go out of their way to ensure that you are having an amazing experience at whatever point in time of the day it is for you. And I think that's an important lesson and takeaway here too. At the end of the day, you still, you've got to have that fabric of wanting to delight your customers at every moment that matters through that journey along the way. No technology is ever going to replace that in totality. All right, let's talk a little bit more about what the big themes. What do we see commonly in the contact center challenges? G, you want to open up first? What are the big issues our customers are wrestling with?
Yeah, I mean, there's more than we have listed here, right? But these are the three general themes. One is a disjointed customer experience. Now, what does that mean? Typically, the customer is going to try and communicate over different channels, and we'll cover what those channels might be. But as a result, the experience that they're exposed to is going to be different each time. When, as a consumer, I would hope that there's a history of my past engagements. You can fault that to some extent to the fact that in the background, there's most likely a number of disjointed systems, data silos, and so forth, that very often agents have to manually overcome. And so I agree with you to your earlier point. That's where individuals can still contribute quite a bit of value to the customer experience process, right? As long as they're empowered to do so. Then there's all the operational costs. Typically contact centers, customer experience in general, it's not cheap to do it well. It pays for itself. You had mentioned how you get higher retention, higher returning customers, and so on and so forth. But there's obviously going to be some complexities there. And then you've got process inefficiencies. Everything from the agent to the supervisor to even the analytics themselves. And that, again, the swivel chairing between systems, being able to monitor what is now predominantly remote workforces as a result of COVID years ago. But again, there's other aspects here. There's agent retention and burnout. There's the dynamic skilling and routing. Historically, right now, agents, as of last year, are actually fielding more inquiries, and the types of inquiries are substantially more complex. So again, if they have to do that in addition to setting up people's passwords, you have to worry about the retention of those individuals, skilling, and then if they're if you're measuring their performance on how quickly they're servicing the next customer, at what point does personalization get affected? So there's a lot of challenges. Some of them are old, some of them are new. For example, how do you then adopt AI to maybe help the agent? In some cases, maybe just take over things that they would rather not do, like some of the manual events. So I'd say they're pretty diverse in terms of the types of challenges that we're trying to solve for today.
Awesome, David. Anything you want to add to there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the only other thing that I might add to this is, all of these challenges that are presented here, when we talk about, trying to, bring some of the insights from your back end processes that serve the customers effectively, that if it's not intentional enough, in addition to these things, it also drives up the additional interactions to solve the customer's problem,
Yep.
as well as potentially results in some customer retention challenges and some other things as well. So not only does it drive the volume because of some of these inefficiencies and high cost, but then it has some trickle down impacts as well. So
makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Fun facts. G, what do you got for facts? Get some
Yeah, so yeah, I have some fun facts. There's plenty. Look, some of the pretty obvious ones. Most individuals would rather given the option to use self-service, but emphasis on simple issues. At the same time, there's almost very little room for error when it comes to their tolerance for mistakes. So, for example, 3 or 4 individuals will actually cease using a chatbot after just a single negative experience. So that puts quite a bit of pressure on making sure that as you're launching these capabilities, that you've covered all the difficult or potential use cases. Because otherwise, if they have a bad experience and are unwilling to use that channel in the future, guess what? That's just going to come back and add to your call volume within the contact center. Everyone is interested in AI. But interestingly enough, customers want to make sure that this may change in the future, but at least today, and I'm sure going into next year, they want to make sure that there's some oversight. When we talk about hallucinations and things of that nature, but as has been validated by an individual. And at the same time, customers want instant gratification. So as soon as they want to get in contact with someone, they want to make sure that, well, you're available. And so there's a lot of things going on here that create a lot of conflicts of interest and complexities in terms of what should you prioritize operationally as a contact center. Personally, for me, it makes it all very interesting, but I know it's a headache for others. Yeah, and then the other thing is obviously channels. Look, some people in this webinar might think, oh my God, phone is still one of the dominant channels. Isn't that what we're trying to undo? Yes, it is. It and email is still the predominant channels. But the reality is now there's a broad diversification in terms of how people want to communicate. And very often, obviously, it's going to be the customer who's going to determine what they think is going to be the best form of communication. And that is going to be very, very contingent on the context. So if it's something urgent by their definition or something time sensitive, emotional, and so forth, very likely they're going to call. But if given the option, they'll gladly try and do things over digital channels. Even if you reduce call volumes, let's say by half, it's still going to be one of those channels that within the contact center, you're going to have to make sure you account for. And make sure that you understand that most likely it's going to be the channel that will have the greatest degree of success, first call resolution, empathy, the ability to build rapport and relationships. What you want to do is be able to get to a point where you successfully carve out that channel for only those things where an individual and the higher cost of service can be justified, and then offload everything else through those digital channels when otherwise possible.
Yeah, this when you put this chart in front of me, it kind of blew my mind. I mean, as a person who started their IT career taking calls in a contact center, to date myself, troubleshooting modem initialization strings, so try to make that work. But there's what astonished me was some of the old tried and true methods still here very much at the top, and yet now the diversification, all of the different channels and experiences that we can create. So we can really meet people where they're at and provide the kind of experience that they're looking for. But to me, like diversification is kind of a big theme here as well. We have to diversify and account for a lot of different constituencies and how they're seeking to engage. So you take all that back, David, considerations. What creates that modern customer experience, right? What are our customers and their and by proxy their customers? What do they think about when they think modern customer experience? If those words even go together in a sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's, some of these key components here on the slide, but it all really kind of comes down to really understanding your customers and understanding how they interact with you. really understanding the journey that they take with you as a brand new customer, as a customer that's been with you for quite some time. When they have an issue or when they want to manage their service or their goods or any of those kinds of components, just really understanding how they interact with you. So study them. Make sure that you have really great metrics to understand where their sentiment is, how the process is performing, understanding impacts of your internal processes to the drive and uptick or really the downtick of interactions that they have with your contact center. And then overall, I would say just simplify the process. I think that we are in a new age here with AI where we really have a great opportunity to really streamline our processes. And there's a lot of really great capabilities. And we're still seeing, many customers out there with homegrown capabilities, swivel chair, simplify your process. And I think, there's a lot of really great goodness that can come out of that. It really also help reset the thinking internally on how you solve for these things because of all the newer capabilities out there, and let the tools help you simplify those processes.
Awesome. Well, let's pivot then. We've talked a little bit about AI. We've mentioned it a few times. I think we've got probably a wide range of knowledge. Some people on this call maybe just learned to spell AI. Others have probably been neck deep in this for months, if not years. I want to get us grounded a little bit. Let's first and foremost, let's talk about, because I think it's so easy with Gen AI. It's all the rage. It's in all the news. But when we're talking about AI, we're not just talking about Gen AI, right, guys? And so just first and foremost, and I see a question out there to this point too. Are we leveraging ServiceNow AI? Something else? Let's get grounded. Let's talk about, David. You want to talk through this slide a little bit? Just talk about the different AI technologies at work within the Now platform. I think it's going to help set the stage for how we begin to employ those more effectively in our customer experience.
Yeah, so just here on the left, all of the various AI technologies around intelligence. It really could be the conversational intelligence, the summarization. A lot of the capabilities that we're really digging into, currently is things such as case summarization and Now Assist, really arming and equipping those contact center agents with the information that they need to serve those customers. And so, just kind of touching on those from a contact perspective really helps get, your customers the answers and information that they need quicker. AI can more predict what a customer might want or need based on who they are, their persona, their account, as well as maybe what products that they have. We're really talking about AI being more predictive about what that customer might need based on what we've learned within our LLM. And so what can we get out of that? We can get, a lot of really great outcomes around, number of contacts, the human error that can get injected with the types of answers. We talked a little bit earlier about outsourced contact center associates or new contact center associates. A lot of these new AI technologies will really help take the legacy data that's built within your LLM and project that to case resolution and to get the answers to your customers faster, getting to more, MTTR, faster resolution time, process efficiency, all that goodness that we're all trying to get out of the contact center experience.
Awesome. All right, let's get rid of our automation. I'm gonna go right to the aha. So, what have we learned, right? I think we from the big peak of the hype cycle, not all that long ago to present day, David, maybe you can talk a little bit more. What are we learning about Gen AI? What's it great for? What's it not great for? But more importantly, what's it dependent upon? I think that's the big secret here.
Yeah, I think it's really great for the things that we were just talking about on the previous slide with a lot of that intelligence. I think, some things, and I wouldn't say it's not great, but really just setting our customers up for success. There's two things that I really want to point out here that's really important. It's really important to have the right architecture, right? We talk about the swivel chair. If your data is in multiple systems, then how is your LLM projecting that information? So making sure that you're very intentional on the right architecture to make sure that AI has the right information to work off of. And then the second component of this is data. So, if we back to the email as a process, if we're using a lot of that, it's not really building that data for us. And, thanks for advancing this, John. So the next kind of component of this is it really is about how do we get information that's inside of our organization and the point of view that we have as a collective, and getting that to our customers. And so we actually have been finding with the larger organizations that we've been working with, just, how, and I would say it's not even like so disjointed. There is actually some great synergies, but it really is just synthesizing the information that the customer is really looking for. And, studying your customers and understanding what they want, getting data on their inquiries, and being intentional about that customer journey and providing that, I think is a really key to a good contact experience.
It really is amazing how, you really have to go back all the way. We think about all of the soft skills that go into making a great customer experience, and yet we can distill all that down to a fundamental data model, and understanding our data and how we can bring that together to piece together, better deriving of answers, better driving of solutions, where to take a customer next. Ultimately, all kind of leads up to that. You don't often equate those things together, but it really, as this slide is intended to illustrate, it really is the entire journey, and kind of looking at all aspects of that journey that we need to assess, from the data to the soft skill and everything in between. But through that, we can create great customer experiences. We can create better revenue recognition, better customer retention, and certainly better productivity for your agents on the desk. So I think, all those things come together to create, what we would determine to be that enhanced customer service. Let's, G, I want to kind of pivot over, kind of keep things moving forward here. I know we're coming up on time here. Talk to us a little bit. I think when I think about 3CLogic and what you guys are doing, I've got great appreciation. I opened up, you and I started our conversation many years back in innovation. I've always seen you as an innovation company, but what I really appreciate is how you are approaching innovation. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Let's start with kind of conversational AI and voice self-service, and how you guys are pioneering in that space.
Well, I think it piggybacks off of what you guys have sort of laid as a foundational framework, right? To Dave's point, you can't, if you have data in different silos, which affects your LLM models, which affects your potential to apply AI, guess what? That's gonna trickle all the way out to the engagements themselves in your contact center. It's just that simple. So with a lot of organizations that we deal with, typically we want to make sure that they have a mature foundational state built on ServiceNow, where the workflows, the data, and so forth are clean, concise, connected, so that when you do have an engagement, like a conversational AI type of use case, when the tool is looking or sourcing that information to provide that response to, hey, tell me somebody who worked with your calling about, okay, I understand your intent. Intent is just one piece of the model. You then need to have context. And that context can't be stored in 50 different locations. That substantially complicates the outcome. And so when you're looking at voice self-service, call deflection, the way in which we approach it is, look, contact center by itself as a technology is only half of the equation, right? You need a platform like ServiceNow to be the other half. They're both sides of the same, or two sides of the same coin. So if you are successful in leveraging, for example, a third era to apply the appropriate methodology, make sure your data is clean, make sure your workflows and your system of action, your back office is in order, then you can start addressing the front office. And then these types of conversational voice self-service use cases are possible. And to the question about, well, what AI are you using? To be honest, there are instances where you can have AI feeding AI. So, if the conversational AI is, for example, 3CLogic's, we're providing the voice interface, if you will. We may still be using ServiceNow's AI to do the data hunting, to get the context and bring it back, as just one example. So it's, where do the handshakes take place? Ultimately, you want it to be a single technology stack for the agent, so they're not swivel chairing, to your point, David. That is going to create a better, more optimized experience for the customer. And it's going to also satisfy all the administrative and C-suite requirements when it comes to operational efficiency, cost reduction, headcount reduction, scale, and everything that comes with it.
Awesome. And kind of pivoting then, because, while, certainly the front end customer service is still a big factor, we have a lot of our attendees on the call today that, it's still all about, it's still about reducing cost. And we know that that's still a major imperative, and so I think you're finding that balance, how we reduce cost, how we maintain that or elevate that experience in parallel. is something a lot of, a lot of our attendees are wrestling with. Maybe talk about some of the ways that you're helping them to reduce costs while maintaining that experience.
I think first and foremost, they want to make sure their costs aren't going up. Because as I mentioned earlier, right now, they're actually fielding more requests, more complex requests, and they're trying to think, how do I scale this without necessarily increasing my costs? So that's step one, is can we make sure we cut it off, right? And at that point, can we also then potentially over time reduce it? So you have, agent optimization tools that you can leverage, like sentiment analysis, the ability to do, to leverage ServiceNow data to then create intelligent outcomes and experiences. There's also the ability to enable that citizen developer experience, right? There was a couple of years ago where you had to code the IVR, and it was usually administered by a completely separate group. So there's a dependency, whether it's outsourced or insourced, which was, creating costs or at least delays. Now you can administer, and if you jump to the next slide, there's a quick image for that. You can administer, your contact center and voice workflows natively from within the ServiceNow platform. But it's not just an independent workflow. It's one that's made intelligent by the information that it has access to within ServiceNow. So it has context. It's aware. I know it's John. I know John has an open case. I'm going to try and take him, through some call deflection or self-service options. And if that's not possible, I'm going to get him to David. And David, as an agent, as a recipient, is going to have an optimized experience. It's all going to be in one place. There's going to be automation in forms of real-time transcription, as well as post-call transcription, so I don't have to take notes. Fun fact, agents spend about 6 minutes between calls taking notes. Can you imagine if you could just take those 6 minutes back and let them go help with your customer? 2/3 of an agent's time is spent not helping customers. It's actually overcoming all the back-end systems that they are required to use and to try and affect ultimately that customer experience that we're talking about at length. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reduce costs, and it's going to be at different stages of the entire customer journey, but it is still foundationally built on having a data model that is already cleansed and a set of workflows that have already been optimized. If you've done the homework, and that's where you guys obviously come in, then I think you can have a very, very interesting conversation as to what the potential for your contact center could be in a way that is completely transformative versus what we're traditionally used to. If that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. And, I think that 6 minutes of note taking was a dig on my, you must have looked at my last help desk stats. I was a pretty slow typer back in the day. But, in the spirit, though, of how we increase agent productivity, right? Maybe you can touch upon these things as well, because I think this goes to the heart, making them more productive, but I think aren't also more productive agents happier agents, and thus retention is addressed here as well?
Yeah, so the cost model, there's different ways you can affect it. It is more expensive to train net new individuals than it is to retain them, right? So you want to empower them with the tools and capabilities that are going to make their job, successful. And so, how do you remove those manual tasks like note taking? How can that feed ServiceNow and Now Assist with the automated resolution notes? So again, an example of AI feeding AI. How can you make sure that they're working where work happens? In this case, ServiceNow. So if the case is in ServiceNow, why am I not operating from that ServiceNow workspace? And that's completely achievable. And then also, again, in this remote work environment, how can the supervisors have that ready available insight in terms of what their agents are doing? So agent coaching, automated evaluation forms, how do you streamline? How do you evaluate every engagement, not just the ones that you're manually sampling? All of that can affect change, can affect productivity, cost reduction, CSAT scores, et cetera, et cetera. It all goes hand in hand.
I love it. And, maybe you can close out and talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing around your AI analytics. Again, I think this is another area where you guys are pioneering in this space. And I don't see anything like this out there in the market. Talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah, so look, there's different tools, right? And the tools in of themselves may be great, but it's how you apply them in the relation to the other tools and platforms that the customer may be using. So we have the ability to do call transcription. We have the ability to use AI and machine learning to then assess a call. What was the tone? What were specific keywords? Did the agent adhere to that script? And instead of that assessment occurring in a vacuum, how do you then pull that back into ServiceNow so that it's provided in the context of the case and the interaction and all the other rich information that ServiceNow has, so you actually have a complete view of the story, the experience, and then you have all the information to be able to act on it. So, hey, give me all the calls out of the 10,000 that come in where there was a negative experience, right? Those are the 7 I, as a supervisor, want to focus on. That's where I can drive value, drive change. And it's just, how do you automate and bubble up that visibility without it being this, overly manual and just time-consuming effort.
And, so I think you put all those things end to end, and, you get something that looks like this, right? I think this is kind of the end-to-end experience that 3CLogic plus ServiceNow, and the type of end-to-end experience, and, highlighting where we've got some of the AI, some of the analytics, right? Some of the assist, and what that all looks like. And maybe, G, you can talk about, your one of your customer success stories, and what that experience has meant for ServiceNow.
Yeah, I mean, so ServiceNow is going to be one of those companies in the background that you don't even know exist, and yet they service some of the largest, franchise organizations that all of us at some point or another most likely have interacted with. Fantastic organization. But they actually rebuilt their entire model on ServiceNow customer workflows. And then on top of that, knew, because this is a managed services provider, that they were going to have to make sure that the contact center was part of that broader initiative. So instead of looking at contact center as just one entity, how do you just make sure you're looking at it from a total customer experience point of view, where it's a part of a larger equation? And they drove quite a bit of value. They saw a reduction in the number of minutes their agents had to spend addressing on a per monthly basis. So talk time went down. Self-service use cases went up substantially. They saw a reduction in the number of escalations, right? Because they were able to do first call resolution. The amount of time spent solving each incident and ticket was actually reduced by 4 minutes, which by itself may not sound like much, but when you multiply that by the number of interactions that they field, it's actually quite substantial. But again, it wasn't just 3CLogic. It was the combination of what 3CLogic with what ServiceNow already natively offers. It was a duo that made these types of outcomes possible.
Agree completely. And again, just to put the finer point, love how you are working in and around, and, just so that our attendees can hear it. I obsess about the partner ecosystem, and the partners out there that are pioneering and innovating. And I don't see a company that's working as closely, that's in the corner offices with the engineering teams, working with ServiceNow, so that you're as complementary gets. And hats off to the way that you guys are evolving and working with ServiceNow to create these kinds of experiences and results for our customers. And I also just want to pivot too. I wanted to highlight, one of our customers. It's a global medical device manufacturer. And just to the spirit of everyone starts their journey from a different place. And here's a company that was largely servicing its customers with shared mailboxes. No SLAs, no OLAs. 10,000 emails a month, and you can imagine the stress that's putting on those agents that are there trying to react and respond. We all have an email box. Probably a lot of us are not proud of what that email box looks like on a day-to-day basis. Now imagining running a major global contact center with 10,000 inbound inquiries a month, and all of the follow-ups and everything else on those unstructured cases that you're having to manage. And I think it's just a really good example of just beginning to put one foot in front of the other. Let's go get the IVR integration into place. Let's put some structure on how we get these cases routed to the right person at the right time. Let's put some SLAs and OLAs in place. And and pretty soon, we are completely transforming their experience, their retention. We've taken resolution times from literally multiple weeks down to 3 to 5 days. It doesn't always have to be the entire poo-poo platter. Sometimes it's really just taking a very basic experience and just moving that crawl walk run, taking that crawl walk run approach. So would want to remind people of that as well. So with that, I think it's a bit time to wrap. And just before we depart, want to just and again, a public service announcement. 3CLogic, Third Era, a Cognizant company, ServiceNow. We're all going to be out there in the field. We've got cities all over the world. The World Forum Series coming up this fall. So would love to see you out there. Would encourage you all, stop by, come say hi, come talk to us about your current experiences, the issues you're dealing with. We love those conversations and would love to see you out there in the field. David G, any closing comments you'd want to throw out there before we call it a wrap?
No, we'll be in Dallas, we'll be in Munich, we'll be in London, we'll be in New York. Would love to, have conversations with anybody whose interest we may have piqued. But looking forward to it.
Awesome. David, any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, no, nothing for me. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you, and let us know if we can help you really improve your customer journey with some of these great capabilities that we partner with 3CLogic on.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thank you both for the time today. Thanks for everyone that dialed in to give us a listen. We really appreciate it. Again, love to hear from you soon. And with that, we'll call it a wrap on today's webinar.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.